Unser Autor bzw. Podcaster Peter Schadt hat jetzt seine Kritik der politischen Ökonomie der Digitalisierung fertiggestellt und würde sie gerne bei einem Wissenschaftsverlag publizieren. Und dafür braucht er Geld und das nicht zu knapp, denn er möchte, dass dieses Buch auch kostenlos als E-Book und PDF angeboten wird. Also wer sich beteiligen kann und will, damit dieser Versuch einer Werttheorie im 21. Jahrhundert frei zugänglich ist, der kann sich jetzt bei seiner PayPal-Spendensammlung beteiligen. Den Link gibt es wie immer in der Beschreibung.
Herzlich willkommen zu 99 zu 1. Welcome to 99 zu 1. This is an English episode and a second episode with one of our favorite guests, it seems, even though he was only here for one time. But he's already a fan favorite, so we hope to have him on more often. So Anusar Farooqui is back. Welcome back, Anusar.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Thanks for your time. We had you here like 5 weeks ago. We just both of us were like, what? That's already 5 weeks ago. It was just after the start of the war, maybe like 1 or 2 weeks later in Iran. The episode is called Defeated by Iran. Check it out. Very important episode. But of course, a lot of things happened since then. So we're going to go into some of those details, and especially we're going to talk about one of your papers that came out yesterday, or did it come out today? Yesterday. I read it today, but it came out yesterday. We're going to check that out. But first, before we get into that, can you give us as good as you can, a wrap-up of the current status of the war, or not war, maybe ceasefire? What are the negotiations about? What are prospects and scenarios? What do you expect right now?
So there was a very brief actual ceasefire when the United States said it had accepted, roughly the terms of the ceasefire, that Israel was not going to attack Lebanon, that the transit from Hormuz will be free, and tankers and ships will be able to leave and come in. And then almost in 2 days after, they kind of walked it back, and they're like, no, we're going to impose we're not gonna deal in these terms. And as soon as just a couple of days after Vance left from the negotiations in Islamabad, we had this blockade being imposed on Iran. Now that it was always mathematically challenged, because Iran, you had shut off Iranian oil supplies to the world, or Iranian oil exports to the world for years. And that regime did not collapse or capitulate. And now how do you propose to do this in a matter of weeks to save the world economy? So it was not a serious thing. So that kind of led them to this new trick, this cheap trick of we're going to challenge Iran to fight us if they can, but we're going to escort these ships out of Hormuz. And of course, the Iranians did not flinch. They fired on these ships, and there's no traffic in Hormuz. And now the Americans have to sort of, walk that back in a very humiliating way. So they're basically flailing around because there are no good solutions, and they don't want to talk on the terms that the Iranians want to talk on. In particular, the Iranians have now shifted to a much more they are much less flexible in their diplomacy than they were before Vance walks away. Now they're saying we're not even going to talk about the nuclear file until you not just go back to the ceasefire and stop the blockade and the attacks on Lebanon, but we're not going to go back until you agree on the basic terms of the Hormuz question. So first we will go back to the ceasefire. You will agree not to attack Lebanon. Then you will promise us you won't attack us. And then you will agree to an arrangement for Hormuz, and then we will talk about the nuclear file. That's the new position now. It's very, it's deteriorated. Iran is now in a much stronger bargaining position than it was a month ago.
Yeah, and that's even though the US keeps winning and winning and winning and winning and winning and winning and winning.
So much winning.
Too much winning, exactly. But I mean, still it begs the question. Obviously, Iran is playing for a game that where Iran is quite confident that it can sustain a blockade of Hormuz much longer than the world economy could. So, and there, like, I think some people, including you, have been speaking about what kind of a big of a deal the closure of Hormuz is, but it's difficult to actually put that into perspective. So I was wondering, you know, what kind of, like, because I think most people see some rise in gasoline prices at the gas station or something like this, but that's it for now, at least. And then there are...
Exactly.
Go ahead.
So the gas prices, the gas prices and oil prices are extremely important. Oil prices right now, Brent is trading at above
120. Yeah.
Yeah, it was trading at $60 before the war, like
right.
Nearly a doubling of the price. The really important thing about this is that this is such a direct vector to Republican politics in the United States. The price of gas is almost as important as the inflation number as a whole. Like they really, if gas is over $4 a gallon, that is a talking point that you can hammer your opponent with it. So if gas is over $4 a gallon, which it has been for the past 2 months, there's a lot of pressure on the GOP. And going into the midterms, this is going to be very, very difficult for them. So it's already hurting politically considerably. So it's a very, very well-directed vector of pain. Of course, it's, you know, the whole world is in pain because of this. Just to give you some scale here, the market for globally traded crude is 100 million barrels per day. 1 billion barrels have gone offline so far. And that, I mean, in a sense, that's a large number, but it's also not that large a number, right? 100 million barrels a day means, you know, the world is short 10 days of global use of oil. This is, of course, most of this oil is produced internally by the big countries.
Right.
Traded oil is only 40% of global consumption. So it's a big shock to people who really depend on the imported oil. And so this shock is now is being felt most painfully in Asia and Africa. It will next come to Europe, where it has already reached in terms of gas prices. Now the next is going to be major oil shortages. And then it will also reach the United States. And of course, 110 is a very, very sort of hopeful price for, and from a futures perspective, you know, if this Hormuz stays closed for another month or two, we are looking at above 150, easy, maybe even 200. And we are looking at actual shortages of oil. So, and it's not just oil. There's fertilizer, there is sulfur, there is aluminum. There's a whole bunch of stuff that is really going to propagate out and already starting to propagate out. This is not going to be like it's a rolling thing. If it stays closed for a while, we're going to have to really contract the world economy, and we're going to have a global inflationary cycle. So the global stagflationary cycle interacts with the problem of the central banks trying to fight the inflation by raising interest rates, by monetary tightening, which will further sort of lead to demand destruction and constriction of the global economy. So we are talking about a real global recession if this is not reopened fairly soon.
Right. And like at some point you talked about, you know, if this takes 6 months or so, then we're talking about Great Depression level crisis. While at the same time, there are like guys like Brad Setzer or Robin Brooks that basically downplay all of this, and they say, yeah, it's not a big deal. So where would they get that idea from? What do you think?
So these are ideologues. They're not actual disinterested analysts. Brad Setzer and Robin Brooks and so on. You can predict what they're going to say.
Right.
On any question, right? It's a perfectly predictable sort of, and that tells you like what kind of people they are. And you have to understand this sort of ecosystem of the blob in America, right? Of these think tanks. These guys are getting their salaries not to do actual analysis or disinterested work. These are not economists. They don't do any economics. They haven't published a single paper. Robin Brooks and Brad Setzer have not published a single contribution to the economic literature. They are chart monkeys. They publish these charts on Twitter and whatever, and their blogs. And people invite them because they want to make certain points, and they know what these people are going to say, so they invite them to make those points. Right? It's a kind of little fuck fest of the media elites and the think tank world. But these are fake people. If you want to listen to serious economists, we have a lot of serious economists now in very top positions. Actually, one of the really good set of economists is now at the IMF, where there has been a complete overhaul of economists. Like the old neoclassical, the orthodoxy is gone. These are the guys who are now running IMF research organizations and so on. These are top-notch economists who made their bones after 2008, after the whole microfinance revolution, after everything, and they're much more serious. And so the economists know what is coming. The economists know that this is going to lead to a real stagflation. It's going to be like worse than the 70s. This is a bigger shock than the 70s oil shock, and it's much broader than the 70s oil shock. But let me make one more point about this issue, which is that it's not just a question of how much of oil is missing and gas is missing and stuff is missing. It's also a question of people who are really dependent on this and how are they going to do without it, right? So the oil importers, gas importers, all this stuff, they are the big producers. All of Asia is responsible for 80% of global production, and they are getting squeezed dramatically. So that's going to propagate out much faster than people are imagining.
All right, another topic that I wanted to discuss with you before we get to the power projection in Asia and the hardened bases and stuff. Mm-hmm. Israel, you've in some of your spaces that I joined also, I've heard you speak about the political capture or let's say the capture of American politics by Israel, by the Israeli lobby in the US. Mm-hmm. So, I was surprised how definitive you were there in your statements there. So, when listening to you, it was like, okay, yeah, you assume that American politics is basically until now captured by Israeli politics, and you seem very sure that this capture is real. So, it would be great if you could, for us in Germany, they don't know much about it. They know something about the lobby, but if you could put this into perspective, like how does this work, and like why do you come to this conclusion?
Mm-hmm. This is not a controversial conclusion among academics and serious researchers. This is very well, just like there is a genocide in Gaza, there is not much debate in the experts in academia. Of course, there is. Like same way in terms of political scientists studying the Western democracies and political coalitions and party competition. They know that this is a very, very powerful lobby, and that you can't make a good model of the United States political economy without putting this lobby in the picture, right? Let me give you a way of thinking about it. John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt wrote an article in the London Review in 2006 laying out the case for why we should think about the Israel lobby and its role in foreign policy. And so that's the original case. And they published a book, of course, about it, a very famous book called The Israel Lobby. Mm-hmm. And the thesis there is that it's not so much like the Jews getting together to force politicians in America for a pro-Israel policy. It's that you have a coterie of aggressive foreign policy thinkers and thought that has been projected right to the front, and that has captured the major parties, especially the GOP, especially the Republican Party, in a very kind of a robust way. And they are the ones, the reason why they wrote this in 2006 was they wanted to argue that they are the ones who drove the United States to war against Saddam. And they proved that dispositively. That's absolutely true, right? So that they were the main driver behind the Iraq war, Saddam, in 2003. And now this is beyond doubt. Like, absolutely, the Israel lobby was behind the front and center, pushing the war against Iran, right? So this is like this basic case is completely dispositive. There's no argument. Even the main newspapers, everybody agrees. Like, on the mainstream press, can hardly deny that Israel was the main reason why we went to war against Iran. But let me tell you a broader way of thinking about this, which is Thomas Ferguson's theory of investment theory of party competition. Thomas Ferguson is a political scientist in America, very, very serious scholar. What he says is that, listen, these parties, we think of them as voter coalitions. That's actually secondary. They are investor coalitions. It's the party donors and funders and the big money donors that basically control what the politicians can promise and say and do and not do. And so to a much better extent than voter coalitions, you want to think about them as investor coalitions. I tend to think of the Israel lobby as the dominant or hegemonic investor coalition within the GOP especially, but also in the Democratic Party. And once you think about it in this way, then you realize, well, this is a major bloc that is interested in one kind of foreign policy for the United States, one kind of military policy for the United States, specifically about the Middle East, specifically about Israel, Iran, and so on, so on. So Middle East policy is kind of like they don't want to completely occupy that space, right? That territory, that policy space, and they dominate it, right? Just to give you a taste of this, there's a Washington Post columnist named Mark Thiessen, who's been writing in the Washington Post, which is one of the top newspapers in America, right? You may even consider it the top paper for politics in Washington, D.C. And I quote, he says, Iran's leaders must be made to understand that their lives literally depend on reaching a negotiated settlement to Trump's liking. If they refuse to do so, they will be killed. Right? This is a guy openly saying we should just murder everyone who doesn't agree with us, and then we'll get people who will agree with us, and we will get our victory. This is this policy of murder and aggression coming from Israel and the Israel lobby is what makes it stand out in the American political scene, because the others are, there are defense analysts and foreign policy thinkers who are not ideologically committed to that kind of aggression. But this aggressive, hyper-aggressive posture now from the lobby is something that you see getting rolled out from Israel by the Hezbollah commissars. Just to give an direct example of this, one can track when the Israelis started talking about the threat from Turkey to to it making it out slowly into the West, and then quickly being rolled out all the newspapers and TV channels where Turkey is the new Iran, Turkey is the threat. You can see the actual process by which the Israeli politicians decide that they are going to go after Turkey now, and then the lobby follows their lead and rolls out a whole campaign against Turkey. This is just sort of a small, tiny case. The real big case is Iran, of course. They've been doing this for 40 years.
So can you show this on that case? Because this is like a media campaign that you now talked about, right? A propaganda campaign, like Hasbara in Israel says A, and then the media, the guys in the media offices, they try to follow suit. How did it work in the case of the decision to go to war in Iran? I mean, there are various theories around, that people saying that it's like the way that it works is, Trump being blackmailed because he's in the Epstein files or something like this, or he's just surrounded by Israeli agents and they fool him, they push his buttons, and that's why he went to war. Like, how do you think it worked?
I mean, these are, let me tell you who's around Trump, right? His son-in-law, Jared Kushner, Bibi Netanyahu slept in his bed, and Kushner slept on the couch when Bibi stayed at their home, right? This is their relationship. This is how deep this goes. Susie Wiles was a campaign strategist for Bibi Netanyahu. She is the chief of staff of the White House. She's the political mastermind behind the Trump White House.
She's also an evangelist, Zionist fanatic.
Oh, yeah. And then there is the whole evangelical Zionist bloc, right? That is really influential, and that really, so Mike Huckabee is that bloc, right? Mike Huckabee is the United States ambassador to Israel. He's the one who says, he's basically behind everything that Israel is doing. He's like very, very pro-genocide kind of guy. And so you really have to think about not like whether the Israel lobby is pushing him to do something. You have to think about what they think the constraints are on their action. They really want to destroy Iran. There is no disagreement in the room about whether they want to destroy Iran, right? The only question is, how confident are they that they can? The problem of the lobby's influence is that the lobby is selling the idea that they can do it. They can do it. So Mark Thiessen's latest article is, Trump is 14 days away from defeating Iran.
Yeah, I saw it. It's that time of the week again. Yeah, exactly.
Right. I mean, so this is the real sort of wiggle room here, which is that there might be analysts, there might be people inside the White House. Kane might be one, the chief of the chief military advisor to the president, General Kane. Kane might be the one who says, well, guys, this is going to be much more difficult than you think it is, right? And so if the president kind of like listens to him and says, maybe this is not going to work out for us, right? Maybe we shouldn't do it. Then that is the reason why they would back off. So one good sign of this actually is that they tried this little cheap trick yesterday of trying to reopen Hormuz by sending ships in it or something. And then, the Iranians shot at them and they kind of call their bluff and they sort of wiggle back. So what this tells you is that they are looking for these cheap tricks because they don't want to do what the lobby is asking them to do, which is attack Iran again and try to kill it, right? Because and the reason is obvious, because Kane is telling Trump, it can't be done, sir.
Right. I mean, Rubio just said, I just saw this half an hour ago. He just said, like, Operation Epic Fury is over. That's not coming back. We're done with it. Now it's just about reopening Hormuz to the state that it was before the war.
And so this process leads, as I have argued for some time, this process, there are no good military options. This process leads to a kind of negotiated settlement. The only question is how thin or thick it will be. At the minimum, they're going to have to agree to reopen Hormuz on some terms to Iran, and that will include not attacking Iran, not attacking Hezbollah. And I don't know how thin it can get, but certainly there is a minimum threshold, which is that Hormuz has to reopen. And what the Iranians have said they will absolutely insist on, that's the minimum threshold. And then you can go on whether you can have a nuclear deal, whether you can have a broader approachment with the West, which I think is still in Iranian interest, and they would be interested in negotiating that. But the West is very, very difficult to tie down, and especially under Donald Trump.
So, would you reject the notion that these kind of decisions have anything to do with something like Epstein and some kind of blackmail or something like this, or?
I am skeptical of the Epstein story. Not the story itself or whatever. Like I mean that as a theory of how to explain this, because I'll tell you why. Does anyone in the room at all disagree with the goal of destroying Iran?
Yeah, right? that's always my point. Like, why do you need Epstein? What do you need Epstein for?
You don't need anything to. These people all agree already that Iran should be destroyed and went back to the Stone Age. Yeah. The question is a question of assessment. It is not a question of people forcing them to do things. One way you can think about it is that maybe if the Israelis have some kind of compromise on Trump and people in the Trump White House, maybe Kushner, maybe I don't know, maybe I don't know. I don't want to say something nasty, but let's say they have some compromise on Kushner, right? And so they can get Kushner to scuttle a possible deal in Israel. Right. So and that is not entirely implausible, and one can't rule it out. But I would just say that the broader picture is so robust that all these little shenanigans down here, I'm not sure that they count.
Right. So, I mean, you already talked about personnel. Last question for that Israeli capture topic. What do you see any personnel in the American political landscape that can circumvent this? Like, is there any prospect for this to change, or is this Israeli capture like something permanent?
No. Very big developments. People in Europe need to understand that the United States is transforming very rapidly on this question. Both political parties now have very robust groups of very loud people and very senior people and very people in the media everywhere just saying this is not okay. We can't let Israel capture our foreign policy. We can't let them drive us into a ditch every second day. And so the Democratic Party is now overwhelmingly against Israel. So the next presidential candidates, anyone who's strong on Israel in the old way, is not going to make it past the primaries. It's just not going to happen. So by the midterms, by the next elections, the Democratic Party is guaranteed to be completely transformed and become basically anti-Israel, if you will. The Republican Party is facing a massive civil war. All the MAGA people, the Tucker Carlsons, Megyn Kelly, and so on, they have turned very furiously against Iran, against the war in Iran, against the lobby, and now they are openly challenging the power of the Israel lobby. It could go either way. I think that the Israel lobby will be squarely defeated in both parties, and there will be no special relationship. But after this presidency is over, maybe even before this presidency is over, the Israel lobby will be contained, and it has to be contained because it has led to such catastrophe, right? So the public opinion and elite opinion and what is happening inside the parties in the United States is this is changing faster than it has in my whole lifetime on this question. And it's completely visible. 75% of Democrats, for example, now say Israel is committing genocide. We should not support it. The Iran war is a stupid idea caused by the Israel lobby. Like that's basically where we are. What I'm telling you is basically mainstream opinion now. I don't know anybody in New York who disagrees on these questions.
Right. It's just that the power elites, like guys like Trump, they are still in power. But you're saying like, I don't know, next election or maybe the one after, things will change so dramatically that it will have also a political effect. So that...
What I'm talking about is something more systematic, not an idiosyncratic thing. So Trump himself made it past whatever the elections, got into the White House, right, for the second time in a way that surprised everyone. But you could have. I'm not predicting administration policies in the detail.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that the structural position of the lobby within the American political economy, this dominant hegemonic actor that completely controls Middle East policy, if not foreign policy, that is gone. That is going away. That is vanishing in front of our eyes. And even if they score some hits later, it'll be one-off. It will not be systematic. It will not be controlling in the way that it has been since at least 9/11. Before 9/11, also, it was more limited.
Yes.
There's a dramatic shift after 9/11. The lobby really kind of occupies and controls U.S. Middle East policy for the foreseeable future. And then you have a little backtracking in the Obama era when you have a nuclear deal. And then you throw out the nuclear deal and go back to the sort of hyper-aggressive foreign policy, Middle East policy that the lobby wanted and has always wanted. And you have to realize that the Israelis themselves are getting more and more radicalized. So the Israeli policy positioning and the way they are thinking about the world, they are just absolutely thinking only in terms of aggression, right? Destroy any...
kill, yes. Yeah.
Physically kill, and murder all your opponents, and then you will be able to secure. This is their idea of security. So it's they are driving themselves into a corner in the American political scene with this escalation.
Right. So, I mean, another like this whole idea of the Israeli capture is, I mean, some way to rationalize what's happening there. But also there is another way to rationalize the behavior of this administration, which to some people might look like, the monkeys are, what did you say, running the cockpit or something like this. But there is another way to explain all these things by, talking about Trump or maybe some deep state behind Trump playing these kind of 5D chess games. Like it has all been about, I don't know, controlling oil lanes throughout the world, and this is why this blockade is there now, and it has never been about Iran. This is secondary. It's about China, etc., etc. So one guy that I'm thinking of who lays this out like with quite some advanced statistics and facts is Richard Medhurst. And I was wondering what you think about this, because like this idea that there is a bigger plan at the works and nobody knows about it. And also China doesn't know about it and Russia doesn't know about it, but it's all geared against China and Russia. And it's all geared, controlling the world. And Iran is actually not the main stage. What do you think about this?
I did read the Medhurst article. It draws together a lot of things that are factually correct,
right,
in a framework that may not be the explanation for those facts. Just to give you some idea here about how I think about this, it is true that the Nord Stream 2 arrangement was opposed by the Americans, and the Germans wanted it, and the Americans kind of fucked over the Germans, and that's absolutely true. Like there is no doubt in my mind that it was the United States that destroyed Nord Stream 2, and they said they would do it, and they did it. The Victoria Nuland was involved in this whole thing. This is an anti-Russia agenda that a substantial portion of American foreign policy elites have always wanted is nicely sort of gels together with American energy dominance agenda, right? And the American energy dominance agenda came out of the fracking boom, and the idea was that, LNG is the future of gas. We should make it flexible and fungible rather than tied up to these pipelines that give these kind of strategic advantages to the adversaries and these nefarious actors like Russia and Qatar and whatever. So what we want to do is we want to control the world's energy, LNG supply. And so that part is true. The Trump administration, the GOP's coalition includes as the dominant, as one of the major blocks, the oil lobby. The oil lobby is the centerpiece of, if there are two main, colluding actors, if you want to think of the Republican Party as a coalition of investors, it's the oil lobby and the Israel lobby. And they cooperate. But the oil lobby itself was opposed to the Venezuela adventure.
Right.
Because they were not interested. This is too hard. It's going to
uninvestable. They said. I think
you want us to put $100 billion in something that has is going to be twice as costly to pull out of the ground when demand might not even survive. Why should we do this? And suddenly now it becomes viable because oil is about $110 a barrel. Triple digits. But this energy dominance agenda, does it add up to a kind of global picture of what this administration is trying to do, or what the United States is trying to do in terms of a well thought out strategy? I really don't think so. So one reason why I would say that is they had not anticipated that they would close Hormuz.
Yes, obviously.
If that was the plan, then they would obviously have anticipated it, right? Like they did not even anticipate it. So that can't have been the plan. And more importantly, this is not something that the United States can take over in this way. You can't close Hormuz, shut off the Gulf energy. The United States doesn't have the capacity to replace them. This is a big deal. Like the Gulf region is the source of 30% of the third of the world's seaborne oil and gas, and it cannot be replaced by the United States ramping up production that easily.
Right.
So that doesn't work. But let me tell you one more way I think about this oil lobby question, which I find interesting and which is sort of better than what Medhurst is telling you. There is a paper by Goddard and Newman, Stacey Goddard and Newman on neo-royalism. What they're saying is, look, you have these sort of monarchs from the 16th, 17th centuries who are fighting all these little wars and so on until the 18th century. And then you have a kind of nationalization where national bureaucracies and so on, and whole nation state, the entire publics are involved in the war. You get a period of national wars emerges after Napoleon. But before that, you had the sort of royalist era, right? Cabinet wars. They're saying that we are back in new royalism means we are back in that kind of world where the dynasts only care about their own family. They care about the Habsburg family rather than Spain's fortunes. And it's essentially a critique of the Trump administration, right? That these people are essentially a cabal of rent seekers who have captured the White House, and they are milking it for all it's worth. And you can see this in just how openly the corruption works now. But if you think in the sort of rent-seeking model of imperial policy, if you will, then the oil aspect becomes very interesting and important because there is a lot of rent that can be extracted. It's one of those specific things where the rents can be exactly extracted. Which is, other agendas are much more complicated. It's much easier to say, we're going to kidnap this guy, replace him with his second in command, who's going to give us all the concessions for our oil companies. That's a very direct hit, and you get a nice cut, 15% to the Trump Jr. or whatever, right? So it's a rent seeking has always congregated towards oil and energy because of the structural advantage,
right?
And so this is not surprising that the Trump administration, as a rent-seeking cabal, would specially privilege oil interests and seek to basically say, hey, Chevron, we're going to get you these contracts, right? So you better sign up to pay like a third of the super PACs that we need for the next election for this midterm and so on. And that's the way this works.
Yeah, but then that would not be a let's say a geostrategical consideration about thinking about controlling the world's oil supplies in order to secure the petrodollar and make sure that competitors cannot come up. It would be more like a private profit kind of motivation.
Private profit, domestic political strategy, geostrategy, all these things are sort of solved together, right? These guys are sitting there trying to make really clever judgments about how to do these things, and
good deals.
What they really care about is getting elected again. What they really care about is striking political wins. What they really care about is all this, and this is part of that, part of the things. And they of course care about rent extraction. And this is all part of that, the playing field on which they're playing, in which oil is absolutely a central part, gas is a central part, but that is not the overall setting agenda. I would say the lobby, for example, is much more influential on warfare and foreign policy questions. Just to give you a very interesting example of this, when the United States occupied Iraq in 2003, the proconsul, the guy who was running the place, disbanded the Ba'athist party, disbanded the bureaucracies, the military, everything, and decided to award the oil concessions to Western firms, right? American oil firms responded by saying, "This is a terrible idea, Mr. President. We shouldn't do this. There is no way we want to participate in this nonsense. This is a recipe for disaster. It should remain national. We will help them. We will sign contracts for consulting and for advice and for engineering advice and so on, but we will not take the actual ownership of oil fields in Iraq. It will be catastrophic for us." So they rejected the lobby's aggressive agenda and the very aggressive agenda of the Bush, Cheney, right, who really were thinking, yes, we go in there, we take the oil, and we give it to our oil firm, then they're going to extract it all, and we're going to make a lot of money from this, just like the way Trump thinks. But the oil companies are much more serious geopolitical actors. They're much more cunning. They know that this is a bad idea. It's going to backfire on you. So you want something that is more stable, that works better. And that's something very similar is happening in this case, where the lobby is the one who's saying, we should go in and we should kill all these guys in Tehran, we should bomb Tehran to the Stone Age or whatever, and then then it's going to be all fine or whatever. The oil company people know this is not going to work. The military knows this is not going to work. So they are much more serious actors in the room than the lobby boys, who are lunatics. Like, they are ideologues. They are not thinking straight. And they're not thinking straight because their salary depends on it.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. Let's talk about Asia, deterrence in Asia. But first, let's talk about China, let's say right now. So there have been certain escalation steps towards China. Also certain breaks that China then put on. Mm-hmm. And there is a meeting upcoming between Xi and Trump, I think on the 9th it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
What's the status there? Like, can you say about what happened there and where do you think we are?
So one of the things that happened with the blockade is that Chinese ships could not be interdicted. I was banging the drum about this because, if you interdict and shoot down or board a Chinese ship, it's going to cause a massive diplomatic crisis and a major geopolitical crisis, maybe even a nuclear crisis. So that was a really bad idea. So how were they to control this problem? Because China was, basically told them, no, our ships are going to pass. They're going to come from Iran, and we're going to get them. So you stay in your place. The Besant and the U.S. Treasury and the White House, what they did was they sanctioned specific entities. This is like kind of encroachment. The playbook that they've been using for the past
five companies, I think, in China or something.
Yeah. They sanctioned a bunch of companies that were directly involved in the importation of Iranian oil.
Right.
The Chinese, usually, very, very circumspect and very slow moving and not known for making any sudden moves, came back in a very robust way and said, nobody obey this order. If you obey this order, it will be a violation of Chinese law. And they imposed their anti-sanctions. They placed the United States in a zugzwang. Now the United States, if it tries to do this to these firms, can't get its way. The firms won't obey. And if it escalates, it runs into this collision with China, right? So things are getting very, very nasty. And in a sense, like one could almost see this coming. I would have told them this is what the Chinese are going to do. Right? And one can see that. And it's not a game that they can win. The United States in a Zugzwang. You know what a Zugzwang is?
Yeah, Zugzwang is a German word. I mean, that's it's like a pressure to move, basically, pressure to act.
Right. It's a chess move it's a chess situation where you put the enemy in such a place that they have to make a move.
You have to pull it. Yes.
Yeah, you have to make a move, but all the moves are bad.
Right.
And so they put themselves in a place, and the Chinese response is such that now they don't really have any good moves. The only viable move is to let it go, and that's what's going to happen here.
Yeah, just ignore that it happened. Yeah.
Yeah, but the meeting with Xi is going to be very, very interesting, and the most interesting aspect of this whole thing is the Iranian leader. I think it was the president who was in China today, yesterday, and meeting with Xi in advance of the Xi's meeting with Trump.
Yeah.
This is very significant. This is a very significant signal. China is letting it be known that it has Iran's back. It is not going to throw them under the bus in any kind of agreement with Trump. And if Trump thinks that China can be coerced into abandoning Iran, that's not going to happen. Right? It's a very significant thing. And so this meeting was already postponed because of the war. And now Trump has no options to win this war and is facing this sort of catastrophe, geopolitical catastrophe and economic catastrophe. And she has the cards, but we'll have to see. This was supposed to be a really big meeting where a lot of things are hammered out, including the status of Taiwan potentially. But it's really hard to see why the Trump administration can, in this extreme position of geopolitical weakness, negotiate something far-reaching with China. They'll have to kick that can down the road and solve the Chinese diplomacy problem next year or the year after. They can't. This is not the time to do it. So they are not going to have a giant thing. It's going to be a small thing. It's going to be a thin agreement. It's going to be mostly optics.
Right. It seems like this newly found boldness of the Chinese, especially when it came to those sanctions, which was like a big deal. Mm-hmm. That is. I mean, obviously, it's connected to this humongous failure of a war that the U.S. started in Iran, and probably also connected to the implications of those regarding any kind of war situation towards China in Asia in general, towards China and Taiwan. And this is also what your latest paper or article on Substack deals with. It's free, actually, so everybody can go to Policy Tensor Substack and check it out. And there you make basically a mathematical case why the Iran war now proves that any kind of military deterrence in Asia and U.S.-American expectations of, defending Taiwan against a possible invasion from China or something like this is basically a no starter. Like, it's not possible. So can you make that case? I mean, obviously you can't do the math now maybe, but, as good as possible, make us this case.
This is called the problem of base vulnerability. It has been studied by RAND. RAND is the main think tank, the defense think tanks that we have in the United States. The main one. It's closest to the Air Force. It's the Air Force's think tank. Air Force asked RAND to solve this problem for them because this came out of estimates that suggested that in a nuclear war, all our planes are going to die on the ground. So all our planes are going to die on the ground problem is the problem of base vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And they have done very serious work on this over the years, and a lot of modern analysis builds on that work from the late 90s by RAND. And RAND has these explicit models of military operations that the enemy can do to strike these base targets, right? And so the enemy can fire a bunch of missiles at them, drones or whatever. You model that, you model the physics, you model everything. My contribution is to move two steps further from this physics model to an operations model to look at what China can do and what the United States can do and how they respond to each other tactically. So I model it as a game, as a zero-sum game. And I look at the Nash equilibrium, which is like a situation where you can't do any better given what the enemy is doing. So it's a way of saying this is what happens in a game. An equilibrium tells you this is what happens in a game. So that's why it's called an equilibrium model of counter-based war in the Western Pacific. What I found was that if the United States today, if China attacked US bases today in Asia, the United States would lose 75% of its aircraft in the first week of action.
You mean the aircrafts and the bases surrounding the Chinese mainland, basically?
Yes. So the United States has 24 bases in the region. It has dispersed its aircraft. They used to be concentrated in 6 bases. It is now in the process, and it sorely should have by now dispersed its aircraft to all these bases to maximally protect them. Even inside each base, they are supposed to be spread out and dispersed so that they can't be struck. You can't hit 2 or 3 with a single missile. So they're doing all this to protect their bases and their aircraft. But the problem is that the scale of Chinese missile power is already so vast that it overwhelms American ballistic missile defense, air defense. Even if the United States hardens creates hardened shelters, which protects the birds, China can sort of crack these eggs to get the birds out and then hit them on the park. So if you do this sort of mathematical modeling correctly, and I believe my model is now the most sophisticated in the world, and you model this correctly, you realize that the United States cannot get away without losing half its air fleet in the region in the first week of the campaign. So this is devastating. This is let me just anchor this in some kind of what happens in a scenario where you lose half your fleet, right? When the Iranians attacked American bases in the Gulf, they got CNN now reported that they basically wrecked, very heavily damaged, some 16 bases, all the way from Kuwait down to UAE, right? All the Gulf littoral along the Gulf. These bases are all within short-range missiles and drones of the Iranians. Short-range missiles are very important because they're cheap, and Iran has thousands of them. When the Israelis say Iran had 2,500 missiles, they mean medium-range ballistic missiles that can hit Israel. This is a much larger inventory. So they were able to hit these bases really hard and destroy a bunch of radars, destroy a bunch of airplanes, destroy a bunch of installations. Basically, the United States had to evacuate all these bases. These bases were not 100% destroyed. They were partially destroyed, but the United States had to 100% leave them and move further away, right?
Yeah, so they're taking out of the picture, yeah.
Right. So because force protection is so important, right? Force protection is the most important objective of the tactical commander, right? You cannot have half your bases getting destroyed. You can't risk your whole fleet to stay in the region, right? So this scenario where the United States is losing 200, 300 aircraft is a scenario in which the United States is leaving. The United States is abandoning that and making plans of maybe it can think about how to come back at all, because you can't take that kind of attrition.
Right.
200, 300 aircraft of your 450 is a level of attrition that has never been seen in any campaign, not just air campaigns, any kind of campaign. This level of attrition happens over many years in a big land war like the Soviet-German War, which is the greatest war ever fought in history, right? And so this is, you can't see this kind of attrition where multiple divisions are getting wiped out, but that happens over years. That is what we see in Ukraine, for example. Massive amount of attrition, but piling up over time. If half of Russian divisions were going to be wiped out in the first week, Russia would not be able to stay in the fight. It's the same situation in the United States, in Asia. And on top of it all, the really concerning thing is that I'm modeling all this, assuming that what the Pentagon is telling Congress about the Chinese missile inventories and the American capabilities and bases and so on, all that stuff is completely correct. And it assumes the force postures, it assumes the arsenals. Iran already fired more short-range and medium-range ballistic missiles in this war than the Pentagon told Congress is in China's inventory. I find that a little hard to believe.
It's very plausible, yes.
Hey, China's only 100 times the size of France, but maybe the Iranians are like, Superman or something.
Maybe they took all the Chinese rockets. That's what
it is true that Iran is a very specialized missile power. But like, look, the Chinese can absolutely make 10 times that many missiles. This is not serious, right? So in any realistic scenario where China is going to attack US bases, it is going to stockpile missiles and drones. That means that the entire American fleet will be wiped out. All American bases will be destroyed completely. The Chinese can guarantee that. The Chinese can stockpile enough missiles and guarantee mathematically that not a single base survives. That is the problem. And that is why the empire is gone. That is why the only viable course of action is to basically either withdraw your own forces, withdraw the defense perimeter, or fall back on a foreign policy that says we are not going to confront you and fight you, right? So that there is no question that China has to attack US bases first before it is going to absorb Taiwan or something, right? So the United States can't actually fight China anymore.
Yeah, that's a conclusion. So basically that imperial ambition of, still displayed in the NSS last year of, defending routes of interest and zones of interest in the Pacific and close to Asia, that's basically kind of off the table. At least with military backing. And I imagine that the Chinese are obviously they're closely watching what's happening in Iran. And even if they have only those, 2,000 rockets that the Pentagon estimates, they would build like one or two more now that they have seen how efficient they are. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah, so this is like, you really have to think this through, right? Because the other issue is that the stakes are so much higher for China. For China, Taiwan is a question of national unity, national territory, national reunification, right? This is something that they will go all the way for. For the United States, Taiwan is an extended position. Like it's a far away extended deterrence question. Even if this is a central front, this does not come close to the stakes. The thing about what happened in Iran and why the United States lost against Iran, right? The balance of resolve was extremely unfavorable to the United States because the Iranians were fighting for their survival, right? And while the Americans were fighting for a bully boner.
Yeah, and to finish the war in 3 days, that's what they were fighting for. Yeah.
So what happens when you have this kind of imbalance of resolve, right? What happens is that the guy that is more resolved gets to take more risks, gets to burn more, gets to take more attrition, can really force you to go through a lot of pain because he just won't give up. And this is what we can expect in Asia, right? That the Chinese will really, really invest if they plan to attack. They will really invest in the resources they need to do that correctly. And there is no scenario in which the United States can defeat that either by an arms race. I mean, you can appeal to some sort of, this magic weapon that's going to come out of the data centers or something. There's going to be a god that appears in a data center that is going to defend these bases in Asia. Is not a serious proposition, right? Like it's people need defense analysts who are serious will read. I'm publishing a whole paper. I will publish in a serious place. Will read this and realize this is not actually doable. This is over. Deterrence in Asia is not a viable foreign policy objective.
What about the actual hardening of the bases? Like, is there new technologies to harden it, faster ways to dig into the ground and put the airplanes there or something like this? Is there any way to harden them further so that this problem becomes manageable?
So we have some really good materials developments that make hardening pretty robust. So the kind of reinforced concrete that we have now for hardening, their overpressure resistance is so high that the aircraft inside are protected. So in my model, I assume that not a single aircraft is killed inside the hardened aircraft shelters, the HAS. So what China has to do is attack the HAS and destroy it with actual strikes that hit it, so that it can't be used by aircraft and they have to be parked outside. So hardening really helps. So I found that if tomorrow we had 300 more hardened aircraft shelters in the region, then U.S. aircraft losses will fall from 336 to 204. Right. So it's a very big game. Like, I mean, if you build a lot more, maybe you can get a lot more out of this. But the problem is that you're in this arms race where China can neutralize any HAS building by just fielding more missiles, and especially the scenario that I'm most interested in thinking about is the precision mass scenario, which is the real lesson of the Ukraine war and the Iran war, right? Which is that you can have sophisticated, exquisite defense systems that intercept with 95% probability, 90% probability, but they can be overwhelmed if the enemy can field sufficient number of cheap, plentiful, attritable drones, right? Especially that are resistant to jamming. And so what happens in this precision mice scenario is that, you lose at least 300 aircraft. Like this is, so precision mass is a neutralizer of a lot of countermeasures that the United States can take. Just because of the scale of it, it's so much easier to overwhelm the enemy. Let me give you a data point. I didn't mention this in the write-up because it was supposed to be extremely conservative and sober. But the real data point that you want to think about is reports that were published recently about last year about China ordering 1 million of these drones, right, for the military by a firm called Polytechnologies. And these are loitering munitions that can loiter for hours. And once they have a lock-in and the target exposes itself the aircraft comes out of the shelter, for example, boom, right? These are and they are completely jamming resistant. They are visually guided, so they can't be jammed.
Right.
And they reportedly ordered 1 million of them with Polytechnologies. And knowing China, you know that they can build this fucker. they can build 1 million of these motherfuckers. And so this is not winnable, guys. This is just not winnable. I want America to win, but it can't be done.
Right. Are we looking at a paradigmatic shift when it comes to fighting wars? In the past, I don't know, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it was the US military with their Navy and their Air Force that would dominate the whole world. And of course, we had always, nuclear weapons in the background. But now that we have these rockets and these rockets that are so precise, and then these drones that can overwhelm any kind of air defense to a certain extent, at least. Are we looking at a change in warfare that is paradigmatic? It's not just some gradual change.
Right. And this is, and it was foreseen. Let me tell you what was foreseen and what was not. What was foreseen was what Andrew Krepinevich, a military analyst in America in the American Army, called a mature precision strike regime. He's writing in the early 90s, and he's saying, look at this show that we put on in Iraq, right, in the first Gulf War. And everybody's shock in our campaign. Everybody's super impressed by these American precision strike munitions. And we have a monopoly on this now. And that is sort of the core anchor of the unipolar world, right? And what is going to happen is that this military technology is going to diffuse to other powers. And eventually, this will lead to a situation when there are other peers of the United States in this kind of technology. And then the world will look very different. It will no longer be unipolar, it will be multipolar. And it will be impossible for the United States to project power near a great missile power or a great precision strike power. And so this is the real world now. What has been revealed in Iran is that the mature precision strike regime is here. You can't operate that close. You have to stay with 600 miles, 1,000 kilometers from Iran. With China, you have to stay 2,500 kilometers away from China. It can't be done. So the bases near these places, near these great missile powers, are just not survivable. American power projection in the old sense is gone. It can't do that. All these environments are now contested. If you're willing to sacrifice a lot of assets, if you're willing to take a lot of losses, you can operate. It's not that you can't do military operations near them. It's that they will be extremely costly. And the more powerful the country near which you're trying, against which you're working, against which you're trying to conduct military operations, the greater the cost, and these costs become prohibitive when it comes to powers like Russia and China, right? And in fact, Iran itself has shown that it is nearly prohibitive for the United States to try to impose itself militarily on Iran, because what has been shown is that the only solution to this problem is to disarm, right? Iranian control over, or the fact that Iran can hold these tankers at risk, can hold all these Gulf assets at risk, and these US bases at risk, that fact is not going to go away until you have taken out Iranian capacity to launch these drones and missiles. That's the interdiction war. That's the main campaign. Everything else is secondary. If you can do that, you can win this war. If you can't do that, you lose this war. This is very clear, right? There's a very simple military fact about the world that this is just the only way to do this thing. And what has been shown is that Iran can't be disarmed by the United States. The United States does not have the military means. It doesn't have the military muscle to do it. That's a very big discovery about the world. It tells you that Iran is a great power. in a really meaningful sense, right? In the sense that the United States is unable to disarm Iran. And so Iran gets to control and call the shots in the Gulf. And think about what that means for the Chinese position in Asia.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's excruciatingly difficult. I mean, there's this Hormuz guy meme. I don't know if you've seen this. It's like this guy that sits in his bunker and he controls like 20 rockets or 20 drones or something like this. And he's not even waiting for any commands because it's all decentralized. He doesn't know if the war is still going on or not. He's just gonna shoot as soon as he sees a boat. It's like, yeah. And there are like 100,000 of these guys sitting around everywhere. Yeah, how are you gonna stop this?
This is the problem that was studied by people in the nuclear strategy discourse. One of the problems that came up, the most important problem that came up, was that, well, how do you get around MAD? MAD is, if I attack you, you attack me back. So unless I can disarm you, you will get my cities and I'm really fucked. So I won't attack you, right? One problem that came up, and the guy who did most work on this was Bruce Blair. And the problem that came up was that the enemy could attack your command and control system so that you don't get to respond. So if the enemy destroys your presidency, the airborne command post, Washington, D.C., all the decision makers, all the nodes between the guys who are going to order the strikes, order the retaliation, and the guys who are going to turn the knobs, if you cut those channels of communication, this command and control system, then you can defeat the enemy's ability to retaliate and defeat the second strike capability. You gain it gives you a kind of first strike capability. The problem, it turned out, and this is the most interesting thing and what makes it so relevant to our case here, which is what you're talking about, these bunker guys with their 300 missiles, right? What the nuclear strategists realized was that if you attack the enemy's command and control system, there will be nobody left to call it off. The enemy's guys will fire all their weapons at you. It will go all the way because there's no means to get war termination after you destroy the command. So this is the problem. So we can destroy it. Suppose we nuke Tehran, right? What happens? Do you think these guys will stop firing? No.
Yeah, exactly. The Hormuz guy, he probably won't. He's just waiting for the boat to pass and gonna shoot.
Right. And so the problem of attacking command and control is a very, very serious problem. First of all, it's a highly escalating thing, which raises basically an all-out war. Mm-hmm. And second of all, it makes the problem of war termination impossible. So this problem of war termination is exactly why we are stuck right now in this ceasefire and this blockade and this, whatever the frozen conflict that we are in right now, because nobody seriously thought about the problem of war termination. It's a very well-studied problem. There are experts, people who've written multiple books on the problem of war termination. And if you're familiar at all with this, you know that everything they're doing is completely wrong. So it's these problems have not been thought through, and this kind of the striking thing to me is that when you returning to the problem that you originally raised about the capture of U.S. foreign policy by the lobby, it's not just a question of their aggressive agenda. It's also a question of their incompetence.
Yeah, their skills, their knowledge, their lack of...
their lack of knowledge. They don't know what they're doing. They're morons. Right. And they are driving us into a ditch, and they've driven us into a ditch multiple times already. And it's because they're incompetent fucks. The Israelis are supposed to be smart people. These are very dumb people, right? Like there is a lot of talent. People understand how this works. There are a lot of America has a very deep bench. The West has an extremely deep bench. But all the serious people have been excluded from the conversation because the morons have taken over. The influence of the lobby is so nefarious because of its relationship with the media and how the media sort of platforms the morons and sidelines the actual experts. That's a meta problem in the West. That is why the West is sort of floundering around in these absurd positions that make no sense at all.
Yeah, the experts won't stay so silent with their critique of any kind of endeavor like that, as morons will be when you just tell them what to say and they will sing it. Yes. Okay. Anusar, thanks so much. That was enlightening again. So
thank you for having me. Let's do this again.
Definitely. Okay. Have a nice evening for you, and I'm gonna go to sleep. So
good night, man. Nice talk.
See you later. Bye.
Okay.
Leute, wir brauchen eure Hilfe. Wenn euch dieses Video gefallen hat, klickt auf Like, abonniert den Kanal und vergesst nicht das Glöckchen zu drücken, damit ihr benachrichtigt werdet, wenn wir neuen Content droppen.
Außerdem solltet ihr uns überall folgen, wo wir verfügbar sind. Das ist Facebook, Instagram, Twitter und Twitch. Und wenn wir irgendwelche Ankündigungen machen oder Posts, dann shared, was das Zeug hält. Gebt uns all eure Liebe.
Wir haben mittlerweile ziemlich signifikante Kosten. Wenn ihr es euch irgendwie leisten könnt, unterstützt uns doch auf Patreon. Dann kommt ihr auch in den Genuss verschiedener Vorteile, wie zum Beispiel Zugang zu unserer Discord-Community oder Zugang zu den ultrageheimen Patreon-Episoden, die wir dort posten. Außerdem könnt ihr uns natürlich auch über PayPal Spenden zukommen lassen.
Außerdem haben wir mittlerweile einen eigenen Online-Shop. Das heißt, wenn ihr euch immer noch fragt, was ihr euren Lieben zu Weihnachten, Ostern oder sonst wie schenken könnt, geht dorthin und kauft duftes Merch.
Alle Links dazu hier in der Beschreibung oder auch auf unserer Webseite 99zu1.de.
Vielen Dank fürs Dabeisein, danke für die Unterstützung und wir sehen uns in diesem Theater.